You know, whether it's in blockbuster movies or scrolling through news headlines, this idea of the end times is everywhere. It's a topic that just totally captures our imagination. It's debated, it's feared, and for many, it's a core part of their faith. So let's dive in and really try to get a clearer picture of what it's all about. So, this is the big one, right? The question you hear all the time, especially when things in the world feel, well, chaotic. Are these the final days? It might seem like a super modern question, something unique to our time, but honestly, people have been asking this very same thing for centuries. Okay, so to get past all the speculation and the headlines, we really need to understand the formal field of study that's behind all of this. It's time to shift from that popular question to the actual theological discipline that explores it. Right, so the official term for all of this is eschatology. It's the part of theology that focuses on what are called the last things. And let's be super clear here. This is not about trying to predict the future with a crystal ball or cracking some secret code. It's a serious field of study, looking at core Christian beliefs about how history will ultimately wrap up. And this, right here, is probably one of the most important things to get. A lot of scholars point out that when the biblical authors were writing about the end, they were often way more focused on practical, day-to-day concerns. The goal wasn't just to satisfy our curiosity about what's coming, but to show how our hope for the future should fundamentally change how we live our lives, right here now. Okay, so if it's all about how we live today, then what's with all this talk about signs of the times? Well, the Bible does talk about certain conditions that a lot of people believe will signal that the end is approaching. Let's take a look at what some of those are. When you look at different interpretations, you start to see a common list of these signs pop up again and again. You've got things like massive wars, nation against nation. You see famines and food shortages, huge earthquakes, and widespread diseases. The list also includes things like rising crime and what many call moral decay. And, interestingly, another sign that's often mentioned is the Christian gospel being preached to the entire world. I mean, when you look at a list like that, you can totally see why so many people look at the world today and think, yep, this has got to be it. But, and this is a huge but, here's the critical counterpoint. We have to ask ourselves, has there ever been a period in the history of the world when this was not the case? Is our generation's experience with these things truly unique? And when we look back through history, that question really hits home. I mean, just think about it. Imagine you're a Christian in the first century facing horrible persecution under Emperor Nero. You'd for sure think the end was near. Same thing for people who witnessed the total destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. Or how about living through the Black Death in the 14th century, which wiped out 25 million people? Or even just the 100 years ago, with World War I and the rise of Hitler, millions felt like they were living through the apocalypse. It seems like almost every generation has had its own reasons to believe they were the last. Okay, so with all that in mind, the signs, the history, how do people actually try to map this all out? Well, to make sense of all the different prophecies, many theologians have put together a kind of timeline, a sequence of events. Let's walk through one of the most popular frameworks for how this is all supposed to go down. All right, so this common timeline often kicks off with an event called the rapture, where believers are supposedly taken up from the earth. That's followed by a 7-year period of intense global crisis, which is known as the tribulation. It's during this time that a powerful world leader called the Antichrist comes on the scene. This all builds to a final epic battle, Armageddon, and that's followed by the physical return of Jesus Christ. And then finally, this whole sequence ends with what's called the millennium, a 1,000-year reign of Christ on earth. Now, here's something you absolutely have to know. That timeline we just went through, that's just one interpretation. It's a really popular one, for sure, but it is far from being the only one. The truth is, within Christianity, there are huge debates about almost every single part of this. For example, theologians argue passionately about the timing of the rapture. Does it happen before the tribulation? During it? After? They also debate if it's a secret, invisible event, or if it's just part of the big public second coming. Other major questions are things like, have some of these prophecies already happened, maybe back in the first century? And maybe the biggest question of all, how literally are we supposed to take all of this symbolic apocalyptic language in the first place? So all of this brings us right back to the biggest question, right? The so what question. No matter which timeline you believe, no matter what you think about the signs, what does all of this actually mean for how a person should be living their life today? Well, the sources we looked at really lay out two completely different paths. On one hand, you've got this fortress mentality, right? Which is all about hiding from the world, stockpiling stuff, and just focusing on saving yourself, all motivated by fear and despair. But on the other hand, there's this idea of being an agent of Christ. That view says you should actually engage with the world, share a message of hope, focus on serving other people, and be motivated by determination, not by fear. So what does that more proactive approach actually look like? Well, one writer, David Jeremiah, boils it down to 4 key assignments. First, to develop a new identity in your faith. Second, to devote yourself to this mission of reconciliation. Third, to demonstrate love through real, practical acts of kindness. And finally, to dedicate yourself to living a life that serves as a positive example to others. So really, when you boil it all down, the main point is this. For a lot of theologians and pastors, studying the end times isn't about figuring out how to escape the world. It's actually meant to inspire people to engage with the world more deeply, to shape their character, and to motivate their actions in the here and now. And that really leaves us with a final question for all of us to think about, no matter what our specific beliefs are. How do our convictions about tomorrow, whatever they may be, truly shape the choices we make and the way we live our lives today?